Hello and welcome back to another Pickled Unscripted. My name is Dracoya with Avant Art and Scale 75 USA. And as always, I have with me Matt, the Pickled Dragon. Matt, what are you drinking today?
Kanish, because the bullet
Denise.
has sadly run out. So we've moved on to a nice sipping rum for a nice relaxing afternoon.
Until next time.
Yes, good times.
And I have with me a pumpkin beer. It is fall and I am about it. I am doing everything that I can to be, white girl fall, pumpkin,
Pumpkin
all the
spice beer.
pumpkin spice all the things, Matt. Pumpkin spice all the things.
That's the the jeans with the really high boots that come up to the knees kind of girl look, right? With their
Yeah,
pumpkin spice lattes.
that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. So today we're going to be talking about the different types of player death that you can experience in D&D and give your DM some ideas on how to better kill you. But before we get into it, let's hear a word from our sponsor. 1985 Games. Everything you need to make your games come to life. Use code PICKLE for 10% off your next order.
Oh yeah. Right on.
And we're back. Thank you from 1985 Games. You're an amazing sponsor as always. So, Matt, we are going to get into the different types of player deaths. So, just to list a few, we've got player versus player. We've got TPK, where the entire party dies. We have a combat death. Then you have things like accidental death. Matt, why don't you get us started and talk to me about your player versus player? You had a really cool campaign that ended with a couple of different parties going at it.
Slaughtering one another. Yeah, so I ran a pair of concurrent campaigns. So like Thursday night was the evil campaign, and Saturday or maybe it was Sunday was the good campaign. And neither group knew about the other one, and they didn't realize that they obviously didn't know one another, but they were in the same world. And what they didn't know is that the finale was going to be those two groups coming together and slamming heads. And so I can remember telling everyone, well, why don't we play on a Saturday this time? I can't remember the excuse I gave. So people start showing up to the game, and there's people there that they didn't know, or maybe they knew them from the game store or something. But they didn't really know what was going on until I was like, all right, so here's your evil group. And they're the ones that you guys spotted, doing this horrific ritual. And heroes, you're gonna have to stop them. And so we set up the miniatures. There was some papercraft terrain and whatnot, and they blasted one another to pieces.
Come on, the good guys or the bad guys?
Well, it was the good guys, but it was like kind of a Pyrrhic victory because the ritual. The villains managed to execute the ritual, so it was kind of, they beat the pants off of the villainous PCs, but the ritual happened, so they kind of lost in the end anyway. So,
Dude, what a cool way to end like two different campaigns, have them go toe to toe.
They massacred one another, and what's interesting is that there's a lot of players who play D&D who, the idea of killing another player character, or even fighting another character, is kind of anathema to you. You like you're there to fight monsters. You're not there to fight another player. You're supposed to be working as a team.
Right, that's when it becomes a little more murderous. Like, when you're playing a video game and you want to slaughter an NPC, like, whatever, it's not a big deal. And if you're playing D&D, it's the same thing. It's not a big deal to kill the monster. It's not a big deal to kill an NPC if you really want to. But to kill another player's character, that's when it starts getting a little bit more murderous feeling. And you had mentioned that you had somebody who, was at odds with the group as far as what they wanted to do, right?
Yeah. So I actually, there was a player who I'm actually going to shift gears a little bit more because this was first edition. This is an old campaign from the 80s.
Oh, so this is different. So fifth edition, a lot of people will say that fifth edition is super easy. It's, very coddling type of a thing. Like it's so hard to die. And all the players are just like swaddled in this cute little bubble wrap. That's basically 5e, which is why in another video, Matt, you and I had talked about, how we can ramp this up. Because it's not fun, it's not challenging when you play according to the 5e rules and everyone's just easy in, easy out, no risk of death.
Yeah, and shift gears again. So we're honestly, and I promise we'll come back to the murderous PCs in a second. But yes, there is a feeling in general that 5e is a very easy mode kind of game, and to some degree there's some justification for that. But there are things that a DM that if you think about it, a monster or a villainous NPC, these creatures exist in a world where there's a healing word, where there's rune knights doing ridiculous things, and if they knock a player unconscious and they keep moving, it's very likely that player is going to be popping up and stabbing them in the back, right? So I will frequently, if I knock a player unconscious, it's double tap time. So they're going to get stabbed one more time before I move on. Immediately give them the 2 death saves. It ramps up tension, and it makes combat a lot deadlier.
So it's interesting that you say this, because my immediate thought is, okay, sure, if the villain or the bad guy or monster has an intelligence rating high enough to double tap a corpse, then maybe, okay. But what if, but then you brought up another really good point, and you say, well, let's say in real life, you get attacked by a bear. What does a bear do? Everyone says that you can't outrun the bear. And the best thing to do when you are being attacked by a bear is to play dead. But even then, if anyone's seen that amazing movie with Leonardo DiCaprio, the bear will continue to attack to make sure that this thing is dead. It doesn't want to leave anything to chance. And if a stupid bear does this, then why wouldn't a monster in D&D do this? You had a really good argument about it.
Yeah, I mean, the monsters are gonna, they're gonna take care of themselves, and they'll learn from experience what they need to do to survive. And that includes animals. I mean, a tiger hops on something, it doesn't just hop from person to person. The tiger chews on it and tries to run away with their food, So it's something that DMs should be doing more of to make 5e deadlier.
And there should be more combat deaths in your game. I mean, in my games, there weren't too many player deaths, but that doesn't mean we didn't go down every other combat that we had. We definitely did. I mean, truly, every other battle, there was somebody making a death saving throw. We just were such a good team. We were so attentive to one another that once somebody went down, I mean, that was it. It didn't matter. We stopped everything and made sure that the other person could get back up and continue fighting. But, combat deaths should be happening in your battles. And if they're not, that might be something that you need to look at.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, there is certainly an argument to be made that a DM shouldn't go out of their way, be above and beyond to kill a player. But at the same time, they need to put themselves in the place of this hobgoblin who's trained for war. He's trained his whole life for war, and he understands the ins and outs of magic and divine magic and what it can do, Right. So yeah, it's definitely something to think about. But getting back to the player killing, in this campaign, this was a first edition campaign where the players had settled into and become landed gentry. So they each had their own little fiefdoms, and one player was becoming very irritated with court politics. He didn't want to continue with this style play. He wanted to get back to adventuring. and so he staged a great game in a coliseum where he sponsored it. All the other players, they came to the thing, and he tried to assassinate them all.
What?
He thought, if they all have to make new characters, then we could get back to adventuring, And it was funny because his name was Whalegrin, and he killed a few of them, but he had to escape. Eventually, the party tracked him down, murdered him, and burned his bodies and scattered his ashes so he couldn't be brought back to life.
Oh shit! Okay.
So yeah, it was real deal. People pissed off, but
oh yeah, no, clearly they were just a little bit perturbed.
it was interesting. It was interesting to say the least. So, okay. But yeah, I mean, in relation to 5e, I mean, something like that could happen in 5e. You don't really see a lot of players in 5e though, like settling down to become, nobles and ruling over.
I know, and that's a shame. I don't know if it's really more the way 5e is structured or if it's just DM side of things, and maybe it's a little bit of both, but I would love to be part of a campaign that had a little bit more subterfuge involved, a little bit more politics, I would say.
It might be the style of play has changed, since those days, since the early 80s, late 70s. A lot of people, I mean, it was a brand new game. So a lot of people were doing what they saw the movie Excalibur and they're like, well, I want to be a king in a castle, kind of thing. And it's different. And a lot of the original players were war gamers who came from a background of, they were history lovers. And I'm not saying players today aren't history lovers, but there was a lot more in the way of a love of medieval history. And of course, the original game had a European flavor to it, so.
One thing that I will say is in my group, we had a couple of people who they were really big on making money. And my DM was very, very stingy with giving us money. I mean, we were always just kind of like scrimping by as players, which was fine because it kept us hooked and it kept it more interesting and it made it harder. We couldn't buy our way out of every single situation. But we had a couple of different players that they went to this one town and they met an NPC who like owned a vineyard. And they're like, oh, well, where do you sell your wine? And he's like, here in the city. I sell the wine here in the city. And they're like, yeah, but what if you sold your wine outside of the city? Like, what if you sold your wine in this place or that place? And he's like, well, I would love to, but we don't have the distributors for it, like whatever. And so they struck a deal with him and they bought like 50 cases of wine and they set up little vendors everywhere they went. They
wine tastings.
Little wine tastings everywhere they went. And they would go to these bars in the middle of nowhere, like, oh, try this wine, it's super good. And the joke was that this wine was actually garbage. I mean, it tasted horrible. It was so bad. It was like the fruit wine that people have that's just like ugh. But that was part of the fun. And part of the fun was going to these rural places where of course they're not even going to sell wine at all, and then you're trying to convince this podunk hillbilly person to buy and continue to buy this horrible wine.
This garbage swill.
Oh, it was so good, but they made a killing out of it.
That's funny.
And their goal as characters was to continue saving up and selling all this wine and eventually open up their own winery. That's what they wanted to do as characters at the end of it when they were done adventuring and they were tired and worn.
It's funny because I used to run my campaigns with what I call the silver standard. So if the module says, oh, they win 100 gold pieces, I turn it into 100 silver. If it's at 100 silver, I turn it into 100 gold or 100 copper. I just backed everything off one grade. And so money became super, super precious, like saving 1,100 gold pieces for plate mail was a huge deal, and
It's like you might as well save up $1 million.
yeah, and so it was very interesting. I don't do it anymore. Just I don't know why, but it would make every piece of gear, like if they killed an orc, they took his dirty, filthy, stinky hide armor off of him and tried to sell it to someone because they wanted every copper they could squeeze out,
Yeah.
So interesting. Now, in relation to player death, those early campaigns, it got my players into the habit of, because resurrection was so expensive, it got my players into the habit of.
How much do you charge for resurrection in your games? Just
well, no one wanted the cheap resurrection because
that's how you become.
I'm kind of a mean person, and if you get raised dead, you lose con. I'm kind of I was considering doing the old fashioned lose a level, but I went with the con. And there's a price to death that way,
right?
And so no one wanted the cheap resurrection. They all wanted the true resurrection, which is like the 10,000 gold piece diamond, So it's having the silver standard in that case was, they just assumed if they died, they're dead. We're not going to raise 10,000 gold pieces, So it was interesting, and of course I always run the very low magic items campaign. So even if they found a magic item, they could sell that magic item for a pretty penny, but it would take them a while to even find another one,
And you said you had a campaign where they went to go get themselves resurrected.
Yeah, there was a quest. This player really wanted their character brought back, so he played an NPC for a while.
Okay.
While they performed a labor for the church.
Okay.
And honestly, it only worked because the character was a paladin and he was so devout. He always tithed to the church, and he did the old-fashioned paladin things. And so
you're good.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He's a good guy. Everyone liked to pat him on the back and tell him to look over there when they wanted to do something awful.
Yeah, you can tell I usually play the villain.
So, but yeah, we've kind of spun off from ways to die, but yeah, I think that I've had some interesting ways players have died in the past. Eaten by sharks. When he fell, like they were fighting in a bar with a big hole in the floor, and players or patrons would just dump things through the hole, and over time sharks just learned to kind of hang out there and for a free meal. And so when the player fell in there, he got eaten. So it's not very often.
I did have one game where we bought health potions off of this like really shady person in the middle of nowhere, but we were desperate after a really, really big fight, and we couldn't stop to rest, or we knew we needed health potions. I don't remember what it was. And so she sold us to them for cheap, suspiciously cheap. And turns out they weren't health potions. Like 2 of them didn't heal. So we bought like 3 or 4, and 2 of them didn't heal you. They actually acted as poison. So when we took it, it was like 1d6 damage every single round. It was pretty gnarly. So that's also a really good way to think about things. I think player death it can be traumatic. It can be fun. It can be quirky. It can be devastating. But I do think that some part of player death and risk is necessary to make your game good. Because what happens is when you have player death in your game, it really makes the other characters grow, because that's the moment that all the other characters who are new adventurers and they want to save the world go, oh shit, I still want to save the world, but like the stakes are higher.
This just got real.
Yeah, shit just got real. And then they have to take a step back, and it's like, well, I do want to help and save the world, but can't I just maybe do that from my farm back home?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is an interesting topic, and we obviously spun off here and there, but I think it's fun to talk about those things.
Well, in our defense, we've had a few.
Yes. But we would love to hear from you guys. Interesting ways players have died. We'd love to hear what do you think about double tapping players when they drop?
Is that mean on the DM's part, or is that just, that makes sense? Because if monsters come across enough adventurers, of course they would know that when they go down, you got to make sure that they're dead. If a bear does it, why can't your beholder?
Yes.
And then the other question that I want to ask is tell me the different ways that your characters have died. Like, what do you think about player death? Is it actually a necessary evil, or do you tend to avoid it at all costs as a DM and as a player?
Those are all very important questions that I would love to hear. I also want to know your drink of choice.
Yes, tell us your drink of choice while you're at it, because that's where we're at, Matt.
Yes, we've been going at it all afternoon, so anyway.
All right, comment, like, subscribe below. Comment, like, and subscribe. Tell us your thoughts, and until next time, come back and have another round on us.
Awesome.